Guten Abend, gut Nacht, mit Rosen bedeckt, mit Näglein besteckt, schlupf unter.
Leviticus is the third novella in the Bible novel. Here the author has corrected the sort of mistakes he made in Exodus. For Exodus had moments that, while not interesting, were nevertheless not mind-numbingly dull. There are no such lapses in Leviticus. Every word, every letter, and yes, even every punctuation mark is catastrophically dull. There is no respite from the tedium, even for a moment, throughout the entire novella. Leviticus is supernaturally boring. The author achieves this astonishing feat by writing this novella with no particular plot, direction, or purpose. So what happens? Yahweh, the dim-witted Dark Lord, sits in the tent that he spent nearly half of Exodus designing with the curtains drawn. And then Yahweh begins a monologue that lasts for over 90% of Leviticus. Yahweh begins by talking about how much he likes animal guts, especially the kidneys and livers. Not to eat, mind you, nothing so fascinating as that. No, he wants them waved and thrust about in the air, and the blood sprinkled hither and yon. You can tell Yahweh, but not the reader, is getting more excited as he drones on and on about entrails. When he gets to the part about burning guts, along with the animal poop, to ashes, he says this is a pleasing aroma to him. It isn't stated outright, but from the subtext, one gathers that Yahweh is masturbating behind the tent's curtain, just at the thought of burning poop and people dancing around with bloody entrails. Eventually, Aaron and his two sons attempt to carry out Yahweh's pointless and nearly incomprehensible instructions. Sadly, Aaron's sons make a mistake when trying to burn the animal guts, so naturally, Yahweh sets the boys on fire. But do not be mistaken, the author of Leviticus delivers even this event in an excruciatingly boring fashion. Somehow, the author couldn't be bothered to mention how this flamethrower incident doesn't burn down the tent. So Yahweh is now free to resume his insomnia-remedying monologuing. This time, Yahweh starts whining about things he finds nasty. Oddly, though he can't get enough of watching his priests play with animal blood, the blood of female humans creeps him out. Yahweh, it seems, finds females in general, and the birth of a girl in particular, extremely yucky. He also gets grossed out by flying insects that have 4 legs. Since no such thing has ever existed, it seems the author of Leviticus was just showing us how much further Yahweh's mind has deteriorated. But one doesn't have time to ponder such things, because Yahweh then starts talking about clothing getting leprosy. This gets Yahweh, the dim-witted Dark Lord, on a roll, and he talks about houses, not the people living in them, getting leprosy. I can only assume he means mold or mildew. Rather than doing anything useful to the house, such as improving its ventilation or patching leaks in the roof, he tells people to replace a few stones, and if that doesn't work, to tear down the house that has leprosy. Keep in mind, he is doing all this droning about leprous houses while he has his Hebrew captives wandering aimlessly about in a desert so they don't even have houses. This is further evidence that Yahweh is batshit crazy. The author then decides to show off his writing prowess by tackling topics lesser authors couldn't avoid making at least somewhat interesting. But this author succeeds where others fail. He makes sex dreary, drab, and jejune. So the author has Yahweh talk about orgasms. Male orgasms, that is. He doesn't seem to know about females enjoying sex. Does he go the route of the Kama Sutra and talk about how to enjoy sex? No, of course not. Mostly, he talks at some length about how after sex, Men and women are supposed to wash their clothes and hide in shame until nightfall. Apparently, the author of Leviticus has never actually had sex, because he seems unaware that people tend to have sex at night. Yahweh drivels and blathers on about how to care for sick people by having them go into hiding for weeks on end, without treatment, not even a bath, and then, on the off chance they haven't died of neglect, he has priests rub blood on their earlobe, thumb, and big toe. Next, Yahweh decides to cover sex one more time to discuss incest. The reader will need to take a cold shower to get through it. Mind, I don't mean to cool off one's passions, but to keep oneself marginally awake. Instead of just saying, "Don't fuck your closest relatives or in-laws," and then moving on, Yahweh goes through every conceivable combination of relatives, each time saying the same thing, word for word, about not having sex with them. He then decides to jabber and yap at length about his idiotic and unworkable notions about agriculture and real estate. But then, Yahweh's droning is interrupted by news that some stranger had laughed at him. Here, a lesser author might have said something interesting, but not the author of Leviticus. He has Yahweh nonchalantly order the man's murder and then resume his catatonia-inducing monologuing. Leviticus doesn't have a conclusion as such. It just stops. I can only assume the author quite literally bored himself to death. Either that, or the paper he was writing on, to retain some level of dignity, leapt off his desk and refused to be further humiliated by his pen. With the greatest imaginable precision, every word of Leviticus has been sculpted with superb tedium and the most exquisite irrelevance. Mark Twain described a certain book as chloroform in print, but Leviticus surpasses that. It is a literary epidural, and an overdose of it at that. I defy anyone, no matter how jacked up on caffeine or even more interesting substances, to remain awake even halfway through. As for me, I failed. I fell asleep no less than 19 times as I slogged my way through Leviticus. And it's not all that long. Next time, we will cover Numbers, the 4th book in the Bible novel. I gather that it has a different author, and I am just so sure it will have all the thrills we've come not to expect from the Bible novel. See you then. Oh, one more thing. In case I haven't been clear, I did not find Leviticus all that interesting.